Wow! Now we're here. What a kind of world is this?
This is your first world. And now go on with your quests.
But what am I supposed to do?
You know, this whole critic thing has gone out of hand. Don't be a critic. Be a chronist.
Ah, I see. Well, I'll do my very best. I'm delighted to be the chronist. Tintin is one of my childhood heroes, and I drew a lot of inspiration from him. In addition to that, he helped me over heavy times, for example, when I was sick as a kid. He was supposed to be a reporter, but a very special one, because you see him just a few times really work as a reporter. Most of the time, he's an adventurer. The career of this unusual reporter started in the Belgian magazine Le Petit 20e. It was a special section for kids, from the newspaper Le 20e siècle. Translated, the 20th century, and Le Petit 20e, the small 20th. The first adventure started on January 10th, 1929, and it became so successful that 23 more adventures followed. Tintin's career ended on March 3rd, 1983, with the death of his writer. With his death, he left an unfinished comic book called Tintin and Alfred. The creator of Tintin was Georges Prosper Rémy, pen name Hergé. He found his pen name by taking his own initials, turning them around and pronouncing them in French. R.G. Hergé. He was born on May 22nd, 1907 in Etterbeek near Brussels in Belgium. So not long ago he would have turned 100 years. His work influenced the comic style of Europe like no other. The Belgians are very proud of her famous son. And when you are in Brussels, it's nearly impossible to avoid the city's most famous reporter. Well, maybe the 90th anniversary of the adventures of Tintin is a good moment to look at these adventures one by one. Looking at these adventures, you not only see the life of Tintin, but you also see the story of his maker. Tintin's adventures of course were influenced by Hergé's world and the worldview he had, and the obstacles of his life. Even unpleasant things like the accusation that he was a Nazi collaborator during the Second World War, or his nervous breakdowns due to a burnout syndrome. And some things first appear when you put the comic books into the historic context in which they were made. For example, that King Ottokar's scepter was pre-visualizing the invasion of Nazi Germany into Poland. And you will see why Hergé started to put those critical storylines into imaginative countries like Moldavia or Borduria. And there's also Sandonesia or St. Theodorus. And you will see how Hergé learned more and more things as he went on writing those stories. He was a young man who was grown up in colonial Belgium. And during his life he had to learn that the Europeans were not that superior to the world as they thought. And this led, for example, to a pro-Chinese statement in the comic story The Blue Lotus. By that time, 1934, Chinese was under attack from Japan, and Europe took sides with Japan if Europeans were interested in affairs of countries that far away. Hergé's different point of view came from the friendship to the Chinese artist Chang Chong-chen. So he made the Japanese imperialism a theme in his comic story. And you won't believe it, but Japanese diplomats officially protested at the Belgian government about this story. But the writer remained unimpressed. In an interview years later, he admitted that before meeting Chang Chong-chen, he had a very stereotypical view on China. Before he changed his mind, to him China was inhabited by a faceless mass of horrible people. Those were the typical stereotypes that Europeans had about Chinese at that time. But Hergé was able to change his mind and think differently. As a consequence, this enriched his work. And sometimes you see in his stories how Hergé was dealing with life crisis. During the 1950s he had nightmares about big white planes because he had a burnout. A doctor's advice was to quit drawing comics at all. He didn't. He turned his nightmares into an impressive piece of art. The story Tintin in Tibet. So let's take a look at each and every comic book in the series, up to the Alf art, which has been unfinished. Hergé's last will was that nobody else should continue the adventures of Tintin. And so it happened. But that didn't stop Tintin from being famous, to the opposite I would suppose. It's just a bit sad because the death of the writer leaves Tintin in a very dangerous situation and we don't know how he will escape. So this has been an overview over the world of Tintin and his adventures. Now let's dive into stories that changed the comic book scene in Europe forever.